these decks, including cards from, say, Next Ramus and Goblins vs. Gnomes, have been gone for quite a while. So this is the Wild format. For those of you who may not know exactly what's going on here, it is a bit different than Standard. Every card in the history of Hearthstone is legal. We got to this point through top 64 players on ladder in the May season from each region qualifying for a double elimination bracket. The top 2 players from those brackets qualified for this live finals, and as we know, we are down to just 4 today for the semifinals, who will be playing for their share of $25,000.
All the Chinese players have been eliminated thus far, leaving 2 players from Canada, 1 from Europe, and 1 from Asia Pacific. Here's a couple of differences that we're talking about with Wild versus Standard rotation. If you started playing Hearthstone recently, you might recognize a couple of these cards, but some of them are also really old. Sir Finley is one of the more recent ones and from League of Explorers. But if you go all the way back to Next Ramus, you can see Deathspite and the impact that's had on the warrior class in general. Something like that is probably one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game.
Yeah, and that's not a misprint on the screen there. This is Control's warrior deck. It's a pirate warrior deck. It's not a Control warrior.
Yes.
Despite what that may say, kind of part of the reason for his name, to throw his opponents off. But one of the really key cards we see there is Ship's Cannon. Ship's Cannon gives you incredibly explosive damage potential, particularly when combined with bringing patches out of your deck that can mow down your opponent or their minions quite readily.
Yes, specifically within Control's warrior, which is going to
which is the pirate warrior.
I kind of already dislike the fact that he did that for a while, but of course everyone knows that that's just what he did specifically to throw off his opponents. He had that Spellbreaker in the hand, which kind of messed up last time in the qualifier, and it's kind of become a little bit of a joke amongst him and his viewers because Control is an exclusive Wild streamer. He does kind of regularly, banter with his chat about how he forgot how to use Spellbreaker and whatnot, but that is one of his defining things about the Pirate Warrior in Wild. Not many people run that in their list, and he needs that to get past a bunch of those taunts and Death Rattle minions. Sludge Belcher is in the rotation. That Pilot Shredder is really prominent. These kinds of silences really are useful against a Death Rattle heavy meta.
Yeah, and you see Control here on your screen. This is his lineup. His Priest has been banned. The rest of his lineup is pretty much all aggressive decks. And you see there he has a cute pupper and named Buddy and a doggo named Ruffy. Yeah, very proud of those. I can respect that. And also loves showing off his golden collection to his friend. Actually, my wife said that she tuned into a little bit of the stream and said that he reminds her of like a younger me in terms of his attitude and his presentation. So I can definitely root for him, but his opponent Masinc has a couple of decks that I'm really rooting for as well.
Yeah, Masinc, I believe, is more of the Kibler spirit in terms of Hearthstone. This guy has brought 3 Reno decks along with a Recruit mid-range Paladin. Very much up Kibler's alley. I think he's played a handful of all those decks, including a very high finish in Wild. And we'll take a look at Masinc a little bit closer. And one of the things that we mentioned throughout the weekend is that this is his first big tournament outside of Japan. This guy is dedicating himself to Hearthstone to play it competitively at a high level. Doesn't really focus on too much else, but one thing that's for sure certain is that this is the farthest that he's gotten, and he's telling me that he's feeling a little bit better in D number 2.
Yeah, he's definitely a very dedicated player. Just before he went on stage here, he was watching the VODs of his matches and asking the other players and some of the casters for their feedback as to whether we thought he made the correct decision in a number of tough spots. And that really shows a player who is approaching the game from a very analytical perspective, being very sort of self-critical, which sometimes can be difficult for competitive players.
Absolutely. Especially if you put a lot of time into it, people feel like they understand what the right play is, that they just know what they need to do. It's almost intuition or feeling for them at that point. It's not necessarily even logic because they've done it so many times. But it's really important as a top-level player to be able to step back and have a different pair of eyes to help give you different perspective. Even if they're not necessarily correct, they help get you thinking in the right mindset in case they've seen something that you haven't.
One of the most important characteristics of a top-level player is the ability to learn and the ability to recognize when you have made mistakes and correct those sort of situations moving forward.
Yes.
That's exactly what Masinc was trying to do. But I believe we are getting ready to get into the first game. As you saw, the bans on the screen were the Priest and the Warlock, which you'd actually predicted.
Yeah, we were kind of doing a little bit of the charts. And the reason why I was pretty fascinated about the series, Brian, is because 7 classes are represented. Priest overlaps twice over with different decks.
Yeah.
This is why people like wild format, particularly from Standard, because there's a wide diversity of capable decks and decks that you can even bring to tournaments. All 9 classes usually are represented within the tournament. You look at the ones that are missing, for example, like Rogue, that still also has a lot of viable archetypes. Quest Rogue, of course, being very strong and wild to kill the control decks, and even Miracle Rogue to a certain degree. So, I'm really excited to see it. This series specifically, we get to see 6 different classes, and some as control and some are aggressive.
Yeah. Well, I believe it is time for the ritual before we get into the match, as we have done throughout the weekend here. But I'm told that we've upgraded our ritual for today, as it is the final day.
That's right. So it's time to sound the gong.
On your face, apparently.
I'm just getting beaten and bruised around here. This keeps swinging over my head, hitting my headset.
That's part of the ritual.
It's part of the
abusing Frodan. I think that's actually the key element of the ritual.
We did not collect insurance on that.
Any hazard pay for this? I don't know.
All right, hope you guys are having fun so far. And with that gong and dong, let's go ahead and start game number 1 here with Control versus Masinc. Remember, single elimination in the top 4. Whoever wins this goes to the grand finals. Aggro Shaman versus the Reno Dragon Priest. Everything that Kibler wants to be here. This matchup on paper, surprisingly, is actually very good for the Priest. Something that I didn't necessarily expect going into it. I kind of looked at the data, played a couple of matches myself today on ladder. And, Aggro Shaman does tend to struggle a little bit against a deck that has a lot of these answers. And if you don't get a really fast start, the Reno Dragon Priest, especially with Reno, can just pretty much shut out the game, like we saw in the previous series with Masinc.
It's true. Reno Jackson itself is not really necessarily your most important card of this matchup. You have a lot of other healing tools with Priest of the Feast, with Raza. The most important thing is your ability to actually contain the early aggression of the Shaman. Dragon Priest is one of the few decks that actually has the ability to get on board with stronger minions earlier than the Shaman. Even if they play a Totem Golem, you could potentially have a Velen's Chosen on an early minion. That Twilight Whelp is a pretty strong draw for Masinc, but unfortunately it is already contested by the Tunnel Trog in play.
Yeah, however, this is actually a really important distinction to be made here. A lot of players, even when they draw Tunnel Trog on turn 1, usually pause and hesitate to play Coin Totem Golem, particularly because of the availability of what Dragon Priest can put out there if there's Northshire Cleric or Twilight Whelp. In this instance, Control saw Masinc pass turn number 1, so he felt safe enough to play Tunnel Trog, save his coin. Now, with that pickup of a Flame Tongue Totem, though, that has bailed Control out of that situation, because without it, he couldn't actually kill this Twilight Whelp, and that Velen's Chosen would have landed. It's a brand new game now.
Ooh, but Tar Creeper picked up for Masinc, so both players with some pretty fortunate draws immediately. This is a pretty powerful minion in general. We obviously see it quite a bit in the standard format as a defensive tool against aggressive decks, but it is a 5 health minion for 3, which is great for wearing Velen's Chosen.
Yes, but Control now, because he saved that coin, and because of that Flame Tongue Totem, we'll be able to coin out a Flame Wreath Faceless, get a proactive trade, and keep Flame Tongue onto the board. Flame Tongue is the most powerful card against Priest, and now you guys get to see exactly why that is.
Yeah, this, Flame Wreath Faceless going to buff up the Tunnel Trog big enough to kill the Tar Creeper, and now, Ysera is not what you were looking for at this stage of the game. Velen's Chosen only targets on the opposing side of the board.
Yeah, and this is going to be very, very painful for Masinc, because not only does he not have a really strong play this turn, but next turn his best play is Azure Drake, and that's already passively accepting 18 damage from this Flame Wreath Faceless at the very least. Again, can't be understated how important that Flame Tongue Totem was, because without it, Control would be in a bad spot there, and then Masinc may have been able to climb back onto the board. Just passes on 4 mana. This is looking really ugly.
Yeah, this is the sort of snowball early game that the Shaman can really run away with the game before you can get your powerful control tools like Light Bomb or Reno Jackson online. And the key with Reno, we've actually talked about this quite a bit in the last standard season, the ability to pressure your opponent's life total after they've played Reno. If there's 14 points of attack on the board when you play Reno, you're immediately losing half your health anyway. And it's looking like it's going to be even worse than that for Masinc once it gets to that point.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of ways for Masinc to find the line to get out of here, but even if he plays Azure Drake onto this board, which just seems like his only play here in this position, Reno Jackson doesn't really solve the problem of a board being really big next turn. Light Bomb actually does. And that kind of leaves you in this very dangerous range of Shaman just killing you with direct damage. That's part of the big power spike of Shaman, is that they can go ahead and use their minions for early game damage, but they have plenty of spells to get past that final hump.
And Masinc really deep in thought here, trying to figure out his best way to maneuver around this board. I think he may recognize that he needs to Light Bomb next turn, so perhaps he's best off just healing himself rather than even playing the Azure Drake, but he will drop the Drake into the board, and there's actually potential lethal opportunity for Control here if he does get a high roll with the Crackle. It'll be interesting to see if he decides to go with that or just pressure the board more and try to ensure that he has a strong board if Reno does come down.
Yeah, it's a 50% chance, right? If he hits 5 on the Crackle, plus the Jade Claws is 7, and the 14 on board, that is 21. I don't know if Control feels like he needs to. If he plays Jade Lightning, he still saves the ability to use up to 6 mana for Jade Lightning Crackle next turn, and then has even the same board, if not stronger, onto his opponent. I think Control is maybe factoring in for Reno Jackson and how much damage will he have after his opponent uses it. It's a little hard to turn it down to try to see if he can win now, but Control feels like he's in such a good spot that maybe he can get away with taking it slow.
And I do like this play from Control here, because if his opponent clears his board with Light Bomb, he just has lethal damage available with the Jade Lightning plus Crackle next turn. If his opponent Reno Jackson's, he still has 15 damage he's attacking into his opponent's face with this whole hand of burn remaining. So this is kind of a situation where nothing can go too wrong.
Well, the Reno Jackson essentially heals Masinc in his mind back up for 8 health, primarily because there's 15 represented on board, so he'd be going back to taking at least 15 damage. But the Reno Jackson can start fighting back, and if Control doesn't have follow-up ways to damage directly, he has a chance of fighting back into this game.
Yeah, and the Reno does come down, and like you said, it's kind of like actually an Alex Straza here. Basically, puts him to 15 because there's 15 remaining on the board anyway. But Control is just going to keep pressing, kills the Reno and pushes that 15 damage. But now there's a Light Bomb.
Yeah.
So Control has used his burn to remove Reno, and now Light Bomb is going to take out this entire board here. And Control's hand actually doesn't have that much damage left in it at this point.
Right, and this is one of those positions where Flametongue Totem, because it hit the Totem Golem, ends up jeopardizing his life because of the Light Bomb. It's gotten him so much damage, but one of those weird things where it ended up working against Control, and now Control needs to find a little bit extra juice there. Did he take it too slow? I mean, if Masinc finds one more way to clear the board past this Totem Golem and Feral Spirits, he might be out of the woods.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of a roll of the eyes from Control there, because Masinc actually specifically needed the one Light Bomb, because a Dragonfire Potion would not have killed the Flame Wreath Faceless.
No taunt here for Masinc. Would love to be able to set something up there with Valence Chosen. We know Control has to devolve, but Masinc is not really concerned about that right now.
He does have Potion of Madness as well as Cabal Songstealer. He could potentially use Potion of Madness to kill a Feral Spirit, Songstealer to remove the ability from Flametongue Totem and then heal himself. He could also do the same thing with Bookworm as well. He would lose the ability to heal himself, but then he would have a more significant health minion on the board.
Is there Netherspite Historian can also discover a Twilight Guardian, but I think the chances of that are fairly low, considering that's biased towards Priest Dragons like Draconode Operative and the Twilight Whelp. So I kind of like what you're talking about here, Brian.
I think that really the decision here is whether you play Songstealer or Bookworm. I think Songstealer is what you want to go with, simply because Bookworm still has a target in Totem Golem next turn, and you get the heal off. So yeah, he decides to make that play, removing as much damage from the board as possible. There's still 7 remaining, so Masinc, Azure Drake, the bane of Dragon Priests, now and forever, and the Light Bomb is gone. So now the ability to actually remove Dragon Priest is much, or rather the Azure Drake is much lower.
I mean, Bookworm can really help here, though. Normally he was targeting the Totem Golem, but now he can actually target the 2-1 and use the Song Stealer to trade into the Azure Drake. Control weighing if he wants to attack with this Jade Claws at all, if it was a chance of drawing another weapon. We know that he has another Jade Claws, but he also has a Hammer of Twilight in his deck, and if he draws either of those out of the 17, he's missed an opportunity to swing for a turn.
And now he's debating, does he want to put this damage to the face? Looks like he's deciding, okay, I need to maximize my chances of ending this game with damage drawn from my deck.
Yes. And more importantly, it kind of just talks to the fact that Control right now doesn't need to really attack minions with his weapon. Part of the reason to hold on to the weapon charge is because you anticipate needing to trade into a minion, but you have Devolve. So most likely you don't need to get some good weapon damage to keep a good, strong board. You're looking to end the game in the next turn or two, assuming that you can keep some of these minions on board.
Well, the Bookworm will prevent him from keeping too many of them, and does get the attack into Azure Drake. Once again heals himself, so 12 life versus Totem Golem plus Crackle.
And Patches.
Yeah, and the Patches, potentially. And Deckhand, he just used the weapon.
3, 6, 8, 9. Well,
he actually,
he only had 9 guaranteed.
Well, a max damage Crackle would potentially have been lethal if he had kept the weapon.
And he also may have had the spell damage totem come off, so that would have given him another 25% chance to get him an additional 25% chance, which is not that high of a boost, but it helps nonetheless. Man, you also look at like what Flame Tongue would have done too if it was not silenced. Just again, just demonstrating how powerful of a card it is in this matchup.
And now Control is just thinking, okay, I have to just get everything on the board and try to get this damage in.
Whoa.
Twilight Guardian, the draw for Masinc, though. There is Devolve waiting in the hand for Control, so that can help get through taunts quite readily. So there's still the possibility that Control can pick up just a little bit more damage and punch through, even if the Guardian comes down.
Yep, and I have to imagine that Masinc's really tempted to attach a Velen's Chosen onto the Twilight Guardian. That does leave him 3 more mana to heal or to play another minion. But it's a little bit awkward because he is being mana inefficient. So I wonder if Masinc is going to go with a different alternative here instead of going all in onto the Twilight Guardian.
All right, so now this way Historian can find Chillmaw potentially. Operative
or second Twilight Guardian. I think maybe he's going for double.
Double Guardian could be quite strong here. I suspect he'll take Operative simply because the other minions are so expensive and he needs his mana each turn.
Not to mention that can also get Feral Spirits to help get some taunts, or even just removal damage if he picked up a way to zap his opponent's Totem Golem. That would be a way to remove damage.
And Masinc has to be worried about the possibility of the Devolve, but doesn't really have a better option. He's going to go ahead and clear off one of the minions here. All right, so he's at 11. There's 4 represented on board, plus the Crackle in hand. A little bit more damage. Ooh, Feral Spirits.
Oh.
That can help protect the Totem Golem, but Control's running out of time.
He's running out of time, and he still doesn't even have a way to even out his opponent without the spell damage totem. He can hit up to 7 with the Crackle with that, which is 25% of the time, plus the 1 and 3 in order to get a totem. So it's looking very unlikely right now. He doesn't get it, so there's no out for Control to win right now. The good news that we know is that the interaction with Dragonhood Operative and the Feral Spirits no longer exists because that is the second copy of Feral Spirits. But there still exists this problem of how does Control get over that final hump? Was it that turn where you need to take that 50% chance in order to win the game?
All right, gets through all of the taunts. No taunts get duplicated, but that's actually the Doomsayer can represent ability for Control, or rather for Masinc to chip away at Control's board.
Yeah, Masinc kind of blessed with a good and a bad outcome off that Devolve, getting the Blubby Baron.
Blubber Baron, yeah.
Blubber Baron boy.
Yeah, Blubber Baron is, I believe, a 3/3, or rather a 1/1 for 3 that gets +1/+1 whenever you play a Battlecry minion. There he is.
Yes. So it starts off as a 1/1 base.
All right, well, there's none of those really are what Masinc was looking for. He wanted a spell. He wanted something that could interact with the board immediately. But these Bloodcell Corsair maybe can kill a weapon. Flame Wreath Faceless and Aya are kind of similar to the cards he already has. He has a bunch of big minions. The Aya, maybe he could combine with Brand, but probably not going to spend that much mana. I think the Flame Wreath Faceless maybe... Either the Flame Wreath Faceless or the Corsair is probably what I would be looking at here, simply because Aya is just such an expensive investment, and you're looking for something that can end the game very quickly, which Flame Wreath can, or potentially answer a damage source from your opponent like the Corsair. He does choose Corsair.
Well, Masinc can remove 2 of these Feral Spirits, which I think he absolutely needs to do in this position, leaving 4 power on board, putting him at 9 health.
Yeah,
and again, I think he just knows that this is burned in the hand.
Yeah,
Control's been holding for so long.
There is an out for just a high-rolled Crackle here. Any burn spell at this point, I believe, also just does it. Azure Drake
adds 1 damage, so he gets the guaranteed spell damage. 4 plus...
So yeah, there's only 1 result for Crackle that does not end the game on the spot right here. And it rolls high enough. Control takes the first game.
Yeah, really close game back and forth, and that's considering that almost everything went right for the aggressive Shaman outside of the game-ending damage. Control got the Totem Golem and Tunnel Trog and Flamey Faces all online early, had Flame Tongue Totem for proactive trades, had follow-up burn, and even able to secure the board post a Light Bomb, and yet despite all that, Priest almost withstood the storm. So you get to really show how important that was of a matchup for Shaman to win.
Yeah, this was one of the really key matchups in the series overall. That Priest deck could have been a little bit vulnerable, rather could be a little bit vulnerable for Masinc moving forward.
All right, well, that was a very complicated game with a lot of important decisions where there's a lot of probability to be factored in. So let's go ahead and hop over to Sottle and Raven, who are closely watching that game.
Yeah, we're over here at the analyst camp, who's but very much back and forth. It did look like Control was just going to take it, but obviously the Reno really just giving half health as opposed to full, just about kept him in there. But it was really just the swing of the weapon was something we were discussing a lot backstage as well.
Yeah, it looked like it might have cost him for a second, and I do kind of want to just defend Control a little bit here because he looked silly because of the South Sea deckhand.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
But like, bear with me because there's multiple layers to this. But first off, there's 2 additional weapons that he could have drawn instead of the South Sea deckhand in this position. He could have drawn Hammer of Twilight or the second copy of J-Claws. There's only 1 South Sea deckhand in his list, so he's twice as likely to draw a card that rewards him for swinging in the weapon as one that punishes him. Secondly, Common Wisdom just says you swing your weapon just to deal damage before any taunt minion can come down. We can see from Control's hand in this position, though, that he does have a Devolve, which would be an argument that you can afford to hold on to the weapon because you can just devolve through taunts, but it does play around the small percentage chance of just devolving into a second taunt minion as well. But the big story is there's twice as many draws in the deck that just reward him to be able to swing with a new weapon again on the following turn. So even though the South Sea deckhand was drawn, don't be results-oriented, guys. The play was correct from Control.
I think that's even more compounded as well, like post-Reno, right? Because Reno's gone, so the damage, although yes, Priest can heal with Hero Power and a few other things, the damage actually feels more permanent than it would be before Reno hit the board. But yeah, so we'll just check up on that one and just to update you on what we thought of that play. We're going to be checking back in with Froda and Kibler to continue this series.
Well said, boys. Well said. Yeah, if you have 3 out of 17 draws that only punish you, that's more than 8 out of 10 times. You're correct. So it's like I perfectly am fine with the way Control played that. I guess another question is that juncture that he hit, where he could have hit a 50% chance to win the game with Crackle before the Reno Jackson came out. I still really like that safe route because he felt like he had a strong enough board because his opponent didn't deal with it, and if his opponent didn't have Light Bomb, even if he had Dragonfire Potion, that Flaming Faces would have stayed alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the way that Control played that game. As sad as I am to see Dragon Priest lose, I have to give props to Control for that.
Well, you get another chance.
We do, yeah.
That's the silver lining. More Priest.
And this is a great draw for Masinc here. He has Wormrust Agent, a early big taunt, Tark Reaper, early big taunt. Dragonfire Potion may be a little bit slow, but he does have the coin.
Yeah, and it is very valuable to have almost all of these cards to a certain degree. I don't think you keep Dragonfire Potion, considering that you really need to have plays between turn 4 and 5 to get to that Dragonfire Potion, and having a Twilight Guardian might be more valuable, for example, than having the spell. But at the same time, this looks like a pretty appetizing hand.
Yeah, I definitely like the keep of the Primordial Drake. Some people may think keeping an 8-drop is a little weird. He's super crucial. He has the activator for the Wormrust Agent immediately, so his opponent does not get damage in on him past that taunt.
All right, the aggressive token druid, Control's favorite deck in Wild. A lot of people might think that it's Pirate Warrior, it's Aggro Shaman. Nope, this guy loves Egg Druid, and this guy sat down with me for about 5 to 6 hours talking about why it was his favorite deck. We played some games together, and he really showed me a couple of turns that people don't really think about very much, and how he's able to squeeze out those extra bits of damage. And he loves that style, and he really likes how razor thin some of those margins are.
Yeah, well, one card that will let him squeeze out even more damage is that Sir Finley turn 1. One of the wild cards that distinguishes this from the standard counterpart. Turning your hero power into steady shot when you're trying to beat down is about the best thing you can do in a lot of situations.
Yeah. And this is one of those positions where, Control went with a very interesting off-curve play. He had 2 cards that he could have justified playing as a 2-mana play, even just hero powering if he didn't want to be conservative, but he chooses to Living Roots there. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think here Control recognizes that he's playing against a deck that if it does get to the mid-game, it's going to be very difficult for him to get value out of his minion buffs and get damage in on the board. So he wants to get that Living Roots down and get Power of the Wild on it right away.
It does open up a flexible Savage Roar opportunity, as well as whatever 1-mana minion he picked up, which he got a Firefly, so now Power of the Wild is something that he can explore this turn, which is looking hard to turn down. For 2 mana, you get 4 of stats.
Yeah, the Firefly into Power of the Wild feels really, really nice here. You even get to keep your Finley on the board and just trade in one of your... ooh, okay. Going with a little bit different route compared to what we were thinking he was going to do. Going to buff up the Finley with the Mark of the Wild. This does give potentially a more valuable Power of the Wild the next turn, giving him even a 4/4 Finley.
Yeah, and also what it does is it gets Mark of the Wild a proactive trade, and it also plays around Potion of Madness, something that
that's a great point.
Very devastating. I mean, it's a one-of in a Reno deck, but you know that Masinc kept 3 out of 4 cards.
Yeah.
So it does feel kind of intimidating. It's like, well, he probably has a lot of good anti-aggro cards. Speaking of which, Masinc ended up picking up the Dragonfire Potion anyways, so as long as he holds onto this coin, he's going to be well outfitted to shut down this Druid.
And it is worth noting that the minion damage that you get in early here is really important because of the mid-game taunt minions coming from the priest deck. Wow, he's going to go ahead and Curious Glimmerroot here. And this is a card that well, this is a card that when it was revealed, this is the exact kind of situation that I was sort of thinking about. It's like, well, this card is not interesting if you know deck lists, but Masinc is actually taking his time. Yes, it is the living mana.
He knows, but he wishes it was Swipe.
Yeah.
let's make that much clearer.
Yeah. But it's interesting that that's a card when anytime I play Curious Glimmerroot when I'm streaming, everyone's like, why didn't you take this other card? It's like, because it wouldn't have gone into my hand. That's why.
Sometimes if you're in a dire situation and you're playing on ladder, I say go for it. It's like, living mana is probably more core than Swipe is, but you never know. Sometimes they put Bittertide Hydras instead. I say go for the Swipe if you're in a desperate situation. Obviously not in this game, though.
The Light Bomb picked up for Masinc, that will give him pretty much the ability to clear everything for the rest of the game if he's able to survive to actually casting one of these big clears. The only card that he's probably really scared of if he is able to deal with this board becomes Jeeves, because Control is going to be getting his hand down to a pretty low size here, and if he is able to find Jeeves to buff it up, that could be a real problem. But speaking of real problems, this is a really powerful turn for Control.
Yeah, very clearly was setting up for Savage Roar. Does pick up the Haunted Creeper, which is synergy with Marky Yasharaj. How much damage can he push this turn right now? So he's got 10 immediately existing, plus 10 on the Savage Roar, plus the Hero Power. So that's 22 worth of damage. Masinc has 25 worth of health. So it looks like even if he got the clean trades off, which it doesn't look like he could, he'd be a little bit off.
And he's in a situation again where, okay, he's going into the turn where Masinc can potentially have 6 mana. So if I spend all of my resources just pushing damage here and you play Reno Jackson, where do we go from here? There's also the consideration of trying to play around Light Bomb, of trying to ensure that he has minions that can survive based on what attack and health they have remaining. It's actually going to go ahead and keep up the damage on the Sir Finley, protect his other minions, and trade off rather than get damage onto one of his minions.
And if Masinc goes for a Dragonfire Potion here, he loses. There's enough damage from Control to follow up exactly with that. And a lot has to do with the Mark of the Wild onto that Finley very early on. Not only playing around Potion Madness, but really getting in that damage because that taunt leaves behind 2 tokens, and those 2 tokens plus the hero power plus the Mark Yashraj is 6.
And Masinc, he's got to go for it because Light Bomb doesn't clear off enough. Dragonfire Potion clears off everything, but that does mean that Haunted Creeper, one of those wild cards, will spawn 2 spiders here, and the Mark, another Mark for good measure.
Yeah, Control's going to take this game and jump out to a 2-0 lead. And this has been 2 unfavorable matchups that's going in favor of Control. All he has left is Pirate Warrior. And while Masinc has specifically outfitted his lineup to kill aggro, it just has not been working out here.
You need a combination of both the right early game tools to defend yourself from the minions, as well as, in many cases, the Reno Jackson to get to that point.
Yeah, and pretty devastating here for Masinc, but you gotta feel like Control is definitely moving and grooving right now. He's got a lot of momentum on his side because, again, the 2 good matchups for Masinc in this series decisively was his Reno Priest against Shaman and Reno Priest against Aggro Druid. Everything else is really either favored for Control or very close where it's almost even.
Yeah, and it's great to see Control doing well as sort of a representative of the Wild format. We've said he's kind of the poster boy for Wild. He's said himself that he has he's looking to improve upon sort of his standing in the community. He wants to be able to promote his dogs. He was actually asking me the other day. He was like, "Oh, how do you do so well promoting Shiro? Like everyone loves Shiro." And I wanted to give him a little bit of advice because it's really important that you let these things happen organically. That they happen naturally. You can't really push things too much. Like if you really just kind of throw it in everyone's face all the time, it really doesn't go over nearly as well as you just let it happen.
I do think that subtlety is the soul of wit, or is that brevity?
It's brevity, but subtlety is pretty important.
Subtlety is really important nowadays, and I feel like with so many people sticking things and overlays and directly onto the camera, being able to be smooth and cool is the most important thing.
Yeah, understated is really, I think, the wave of the future.
Absolutely. So as much as Control is really putting together a nice little run here in the Wild tournament, and he really cares about his brand, his imaging, I think it's really important for us to kind of stay grounded and realize that as much as we're having a lot of fun here, you got to stay focused. The series isn't over. It's 2-0 lead for Control. One more win, and he's going to be able to get to the grand finals of the first ever Wild Open.
Yeah, and this is very valuable thing for Control, but also, as you mentioned, Masinc's real breakout event. He is a player who, as you mentioned, has focused pretty exclusively on Hearthstone, and this is a great opportunity for him. He played exceptionally well in the first series that we watched, and it was it's really great to see him here with this lineup that is so different than the other competitors as well.
All right, well, Control looks like he's finally got an opening hand we're talking about with the Pirate Warrior. We've seen a lot of Pirate Warriors open up very awkwardly with no weapons to tie it together. But now he's going to be able to finally piece together really powerful stuff. Masinc is switching away from his Priest, just taking a little breather, and going to go ahead and queue up the Reno Mage, which is a little bit of a hard matchup sometimes because Reno Mage doesn't always have the ability to secure the early board. Even if you play a Doomsayer, even if you have hero power, the Pirates sometimes layer themselves just enough to get the synergies out, and you can't freeze the face every single turn.
Yeah, one of the things, the reasons that Reno Mage actually is a popular deck in Wild is because it does have the tools to be successful against both the control decks with long game power cards like the Antonidas we see in the hand, but as well as just having good removal against aggro decks. Pirate Warrior, of course, being the premier aggro deck in Wild. And the Mad Scientist picking up a secret there. We didn't actually get a glimpse of exactly what it was. He does have Counterspell in his deck, so that's not guaranteed to be Ice Block.
Absolutely. Also, kind of important to note that Control is well aware that Masinc has no weapon removal, too. So being able to utilize his weapons and layer it the way that Sottle was talking about when he was watching Control is one of the most important things as Pirate Warrior, just kind of managing your resources and spreading your damage out. And with that Death Bite pickup, Control's already planning out his future turns. This turn, pretty much just weighing what kind of 3-mana minion he wants to really spend his mana on here. Or maybe if he wants to play another Bloodsail Raider, considering his opponent just used a Frostbolt.
Yeah, the Raider would be a pretty big threat. South Sea Captain can potentially mean that patches can't be removed simply by a Fire Blast hero power from Masinc.
Right. So playing a South Sea Captain feels like you're putting out a 4/4 worth of stats. Bloodsail Raider is a 5/3, so it's actually kind of comparable, except you squeeze in a 1/1. Control goes ahead and plays a Frothing Berserker and starts swinging with it because he knows he wants to set it for Deathbite next turn and keeps his options open. Do you like the Frothing Berserker here?
I think Frothing is a strong play here, in part because Masinc's list does not have some of the removal that can actually deal with it at this point. He doesn't play Forbidden Flame, which is a card that's in a lot of versions of Reno Mage. So given the Frostbolt is gone, there's actually not very much removal in his deck that can deal with this. He basically would have to spend his entire turn fireballing or polymorphing it, and in that case, Control's pretty happy. And we see the Arcanologist fetching the final secret from his deck, Masinc piecing them all together. And we see how powerful Arcanologist is in Standard. People talk about how, oh, this is like one of the best cards. It's like, well, Mad Scientist turns out was even better. So both of them in the same deck is pretty powerful.
Super strong. Control's hand's looking like it's all one shipped cannon away from being able to run away with this game. Masinc has ways to stall. Doesn't have anything very substantial to deal with it. This Primordial Glow's going to look for an answer.
He seems shaking his head already. Ooh, finds a Dragon's Breath. That's a removal spell he can use to take out the Frothing as well. There's also the Forgotten Torch. He could Forgotten Torch because of the discount and ping as well. The question is whether he wants a Roaring Torch in his deck, which I think the answer is no. I think that Masinc evaluated that and considered, well, it's more important that I find, say, Alexstrasza to enable me to win the game if we get late, rather than get just a 3 mana 6 damage spell in my deck.
Yep. And, good thing he did. There's a handful of wild spells that obviously wouldn't help him in that position compared to the Dragon's Breath or the Forgotten Torch. We're talking about Duplicate, Echo of Medivh, Polymorph Boar would have been pretty awkward too.
Yeah.
So, at this point, Masinc just trying to withstand a little bit of the damage. And Control's attacking here very aggressively with the weapon, just recognizing that I have a lot of other weapon draws that I can hit, and I also need to just try to get these swings out of the way.
Finds a Steady Shot. And Steady Shot is super powerful in any matchup, but especially powerful against the Mage, because the Mage will often rely late game on freeze effects, or say Ice Barrier to keep themselves alive, to get to the point where they can Ice Block and try to turn the game around. So very powerful pickup there for Control.
Yeah, Masinc's in a tough spot here. It doesn't even have Ice Block down right now. Could end up, I think he feels like he might need to start setting up Ice Barrier, because if you're too low on health, Ice Barrier is going to be useless considering that they have Steady Shot. He chooses to use Polymorph to save this Frost Nova this turn. Might want to consider using it with the Inkmaster Solia, but we'll have to find out, because he needs to find a way to play all these secrets, and he needs to find a way to stop taking damage. Well, it's starting to get really scary.
This is adding up quick. The Heroic Strike as well, waiting in the hand. And yeah, Control just maximizing his damage over time, wants to ensure he's pressing that Steady Shot every single turn. Emperor Thaurissan, great if you have the time to take advantage of the cost reductions, but Masinc has very little time remaining in this game potentially. He still has both Block and Barrier in hand. So Inkmaster can only discount one of them, and there is at least the theoretical threat. Actually, not with Counterspell. I was thinking that he could possibly die if he just played Barrier, but I don't think that's possible with Counterspell up at this point.
Right. And indications or all signs and indications for Control point to its Ice Block, but this is part of the reason why I think not setting up Ice Barrier previous turn makes it very awkward, because Masinc probably wants to Frost Nova this turn.
Wow, he's just actually Inkmaster Barrier here. So here he's really afraid of dying to damage from hand, but at the same time, Frost Nova is guaranteed to prevent 6 here. So Barrier does prevent more, but then you potentially reduce the amount of damage that Frost Nova is doing, or preventing rather.
Yeah, and Masinc's going to be dependent on drawing Reno or an Alexstrasza. He does have Ice Block to guarantee another turn, assuming he doesn't die, and that's going to still put him in a tough spot to follow up. Now, Control sees that it's Ice Barrier, so How is he going to adapt around this? Is he going to load up onto the board and all in, or is he going to take it slow?
I think he's just going in here. He wants to get the damage in while he can. Putting your opponent in a position where he actually can't break a potential block before, if he thinks it's blocked. There's no way he can break it before Masinc's next turn, which is the Alexstrasza turn. But if you have a serious board when your opponent actually gets to the point where they have the Alexstrasza, then you can potentially be safe. And now, yeah, actually at this point, because of that damage from control and how much came in that turn, Masinc can't not play Ice Block this turn. The weapon plus hero power actually just kills him. Right. So he has to play Ice Block, so he can't use his mana on anything else. He can Frost Nova block and ping, but there's nothing that actually dies to the hero power. Actually, he can attack into the captain and ping down one of the pirates. But
yeah,
still just a really, really rough spot.
Right. And if Masinc didn't have that, he could already have Ice Block developed and then be able to Firelance Portal potentially to maybe either get a taunt minion or something else that's super impactful. But at the same time, he still would be, even if he's able to survive past his turn, he's still in a very similar position of, I need to make sure I draw Reno Jackson or an Alexstrasza to even have a chance to win this game right now.
Yeah, if one of those cards is not the top card of his deck, he will lose the game next turn, simply to the Steady Shot.
Yeah, the Frost Nova is interesting here because it's like you said, Control can pop it anyways. And I think Masinc might be thinking that he needs to Frost Nova in case to keep his Inkmaster Solio alive.
Yeah, he may be trying to get more valuable trades and control over the board presence with the Solia. I actually think Control may want to use his Korkron here rather than the weapon to preserve the weapon swing to maybe be able to be additional way to block or break the block.
Right, and he knows that the third secret is Counterspell. Yep, I like this a lot. I guess position doesn't really matter too much in this because you're already able to pop him the one. And it's come down to it either same way. It needs Reno Jackson.
That's not it. Blizzard can freeze the board, but it cannot freeze Steady Shot.
Is there anything you get off Firelance Portal? There's Holozeal. There's like Armorsmith, but none of those things really can matter in this position.
You get Corrupted Healbot and heal his opponent if it dies.
Oh, man, yeah, I think Masinc just
there
cornered himself, and that's going to be 3-0 for Control. Wow.
Yeah, he came in as the wild specialist, and he has demonstrated that specialization, piloting these decks exceptionally well, and just really running over most of his opponents so far.
Yeah, I think a couple things really swung it in his favor, but you got to look at that Reno Priest not winning the matchups it's supposed to. On paper, it's favored against the aggressive Shamans and the Druids with all the clears and all the removals. But, Control really lined up all of his threats accordingly and was able to just get there enough. Every single one of those games was like exact damage or just like setting up in the position to get the exact damage.
And he really maneuvered, I think, some of those situations that were relatively complicated pretty well. A lot of people will say that, aggressive decks, you just go face, you just do whatever. But the specific way that he maximized the damage and the effect of his buffs in the Druid deck, for instance, I think was fantastic.
All right, well, Control is our first finalist here at the Wild Open. Let's go ahead and hop over to the analyst camp with Raven for a couple of words with our winner.
Thanks a lot, Frodan. Congratulations, Control. That was a 3-0 victory. Just want to ask you, we've talked about a lot about you've been playing Wild just for so long. Do you think that's significantly gave you an advantage in this tournament?
Definitely, yeah. Okay, definitely, yeah. I think that it's been a huge advantage for me just because I played so much more than everybody else. When I bring the aggro decks, I've definitely tested control lineups, mid-range lineups, but I've just come to the conclusion that aggro's the best after playing a ton. Leading up to the Open, I practiced for 2 weeks for about 12 to 14 hours a day with a ton of different lineups, but yeah, all the practice and all the playing has really, really helped me. And yeah, I think it's showing.
Okay, awesome. It definitely is. You're doing very, very well at this moment with only one more match to play out. Again, talking about lineups, what do you think of everyone else's lineups? Do you think they're, maybe you'll probably think they're not as good as yours, but how good do you think they are based on maybe some of the players not having as much experience in Wild?
Most of them are good. There's been some interesting deck choices like the Velen OTK deck. That one was a little bit surprising to me. But for the most part, I think they're strong. Most players know to bring Pirate Warrior, Combo Priest, aggro shaman, those kind of decks, which are good.
Okay, cool. And out of the 2 opponents you're potentially going to be facing in the finals, is there any? Are you feeling scared if you get one of them, a certain one, or are you feeling confident overall?
I'd rather play Alb than Mech, but I want Mech to win, so a Canadian will win.
That's completely reasonable. Sounds good to me. So congratulations again. It was a pleasure. And we'll go back with Frodan and Kimbler to finish off this series.